So recently we got a question from one of our CpExtra users, Mr. Kirk Chapman, and he was asking how to do a particular thing in CpExtra, which is quite an interesting puzzle. So we've made a video of this. I'm going to go through the question that Mr. Chapman asked us, go through a Captivate project setup, illustrating the issue, and then we're going to go step by step, making a couple of advanced actions to show how we can accomplish this particular feature, you could say. So what is Mr. Kirk asking? Well, he wants to have his project jump between slides randomly, which is to say he's got a quiz of custom questions that he has built, and he wants the learner to be jumped randomly from, let's say if you've got 10 questions, you might randomly pick question 5 to start with, and then it will jump to question 3, then question 8, and go through all of them until once you've viewed all the slides, you would then be shunted to a conclusion slide. Now, if we were working with JavaScript, this would be something that you would accomplish using an array. Now, when you hear the array, you should think of a list. What this means is what you would do is you would take all the numbers of the slides which are being used as these questions, and you would put them into a list, and then you would run a JavaScript function over it which would randomize the list. And then you would just progress through 1, 2, 3, 4, eventually randomly working your way along these different slides until you get all the way to the end. But Captivate does not have the feature for an array or for any kind of list in reality. So we need to be a little bit clever about how we implement this with just CpExtra and advanced actions. So let's jump into our project and have a look at how we've got this set up. So this is a simple project. It's just 5 slides. On the first slide, I've set up a couple of buttons which are going to hold our advanced actions. This is going to be an interaction where we end up doing a lot of calling one advanced action from another. And in order to do that, we need to use the xcmnd call action on, a command variable, which requires a couple of these buttons to be set up like so. Now the buttons here, the name that you see in the label, in the caption, sorry, for the button is the same as the name of the button. And I've also set it up to also be connected to an advanced action of the same name, just to keep everything consistent for us. And I encourage you to set up your project if you're following along in the same way. So we've got one action which is called RDMQ, which is random question, generate new random number. Then another action is RDMQ generate random number. Yes, these two things are named very differently, very similarly, but there is a reason for that. And then we have a button down here, go to random question. And this is going to be triggering this advanced action RDMQ next question, which is sort of the kickoff point for this entire interaction. So what we want to happen is that when we click this button, it will jump us to one of these 3 slides. These are just standing in for the question slides that Mr. Chapman would have. So question 1, question 2, question 3, we've got labeled there, and we've got a submit button on each of these slides, which is just going to call that same RDMQ next question action, which we trigger right from the beginning here. So the idea is we click this, maybe it randomly picks a slide, maybe slide 3, then we click it again, it randomly picks another slide, which is slide 2, then we click it again, the only slide left is slide 4, and then after it does that, we click submit, it will take us all the way to the end. That's the setup of the project. Let's look at what variables we've defined in order to make our advanced actions possible. So first of all, let's look at what CpExtra variables we've had here. Basically, you can do the entire thing using just xcmnd call action on and xcmnd random. Xcmnd random generates a random number, and xcmnd call action on enables us to trigger one advanced action from another. I've also defined xcmnd alert here just in case I want to trace something out. We'll see whether we'll end up using that or not. Usually this is just used for debugging purposes. I've also got xcmnd hide here because I had defined that and forgot to remove it. Now it's gone. Okay, here are the variables which are just for storing information, which we will need. So first one here is var rmdq and slide. So the name here is just to let us know later on that this is related to the rmdq, the random question interaction. In theory, I really should have put those in front of here as well. Feel free to do that at home. So the end slide is, I'm just using rmdq end slide to record the number of the last slide in the list of random slides. So we know this is slide 4 over here. The next one, rmdq start slide, that records the first question slide here, and that's number 2. So we've now, in a way, found a way to set what our range of slides are that we want to randomly jump between. Now we have var need new number. This is going to come with a default value of true, and we'll see in a bit what this variable does. Var next random question. Okay, this is going to be our temporary holder of what number slide we're going to jump to next. Var next random question with comma. Okay, so this is going to have the same value as next random question. Let's say this is going to be 3. We're going to put in 3 comma into this variable. Why would you want to do that? Well, you'll see in a bit why that would be. Okay, var questions left to visit. So this is going to be letting us know how many of the slides in the list we have yet to visit. So right at the beginning, we've got 3 slides. We've not visited any of them, so the value is 3. But once we visit a slide, this is going to put down to 2. Then the next slide, we'll put it down to 1. And after we visit our final slide, it will be 0. At that point, we know, okay, we've visited all the slides and we can jump to the end. Then this one, var visited slides, is going to record which of these slides we have already visited, because if we're randomly jumping between slides, there is the possibility that we will end up jumping to the same slide twice. We need something that records which slides we've already visited, and this is the variable which is going to help enable that. So that's the setup for variables. And for the project, let's get into building the individual advanced actions. Now, probably the easiest place to start is just with generating the random number to begin with. So this is enabled through the xcmd random command variable, and let's see how that works now. I'm going to close out of the variables tab. I'm going to go back over here, and I'm going to pick this rmdq generate random number button, and I will open up the advanced action that it is attached to, which I've already set up. Now, as a side note, I'd like to let you know about something we've been working on here. We've actually been rewriting the CpExtra help. It's going to be hosted on its own website from now on. Now, it's still in the process of being written. In fact, if you look here, this is the main page of it, and as you can see, we've only got some boilerplate text here. So yeah, at the time of filming this, there's still a lot of work to be done on it. But if we go up here to variables, and we have a complete list of variables available in CpExtra, and we can easily jump to the help for each one. And I just wanted to show what the help already says about xcmd random. So here in this section, it points out that xcmd random can take up to 3 parameters. So the first one is a variable name. We need to generate a number, but we need to access it later. So it needs to be stored in another Captivate variable. That's the first thing that we define because it's the most essential. Then the second thing, the parameter that we'll fill in, tells us what the highest number in the range is. Now, you might think, well, wouldn't it be better to define the lowest number first? Well, most of the time what you want to do is just generate a random number between 0 and, let's say, 100. And so the lowest number you would want is usually constant, whereas the highest number changes quite a bit. So that's why we allow you to set the highest number first, because if you don't need the lowest number, then you don't need to define that. In this case, we will need to define both the highest and the lowest, so that happens in the third parameter. So let's go back, set this up. I'm going to do an assign action. I will choose the random, xcmd random variable, and I am going to assign it with a literal. So first of all, the first parameter, we need to define which variable is going to save the random number, and that's going to be var next random question. Then we need to define what the highest number that we want to generate, the highest random number. And we've already made a variable which does that. It is the var rdmq end slide variable. So when CpExtra sees the name of a variable here, instead of maybe a number as it was expecting, it will go and check that variable and grab its number and stick it in here for us. Then the third parameter is the lowest number in the random range, and we've also made a variable which calls that, which is var rdmq start slide. So now if at a later date we add in more questions or we take away questions or the numbers of the slides change, all we need to do is go into our variables dialog and change the end slide and the start slide here to get the interaction working as well. You don't have to dig into an advanced action to do that. Let's just double check that this is working. So I will update the action and then I will go to preview HTML5 in browser. This is a basic Captivate project, not a responsive project. Now I will go here, and to generate the new number, random number, I will click this variable. Now nothing comes up when that happens, and we don't have a readout for the var next random question variable that we assigned the random number to, but we can still find out what its value is. If we hold down Control-Shift-I, and this shouldn't matter which browser you're using, it's going to bring up the developer tools. Inside of the developer tools console, I can type in the name of a variable. So in this case, I want to know var next random question, and I'll press tab for the autocomplete, and I will press enter. It's going to send me back what the value of it is. So the lowest number in our random number range was 2, and the highest was 4, and we've gotten a number of 2. So this might be working or it might not. But to just double check, I'm going to click this button again. And it's still 2. Let's click it again. Now it's 3. Click it again. 3. And 3. So that's the problem with randomness. You never quite know if it really is random. It seems to really want to send me a lot of these. Okay, 4. So we've got an example. It's gone through our entire range. It gets 3, 3, 3, 4. Just out of coincidence, it's made them in order, but usually it would probably come out of order just because of randomness. So that's randomness. Sometimes you get lucky and it's all in order. So now that we have our random number, we need Captivate to jump to that number slide. How do we do that? Well, I'm going to do this inside of the RDMQ next question action. So I'm going to jump in here. So this is the action which is triggered when we tap this button or any of the buttons along the slides over here. So the first thing that this action will want to do is it wants to generate the random number, and that happens inside of this RMDQ generate random number advanced action. So I'm going to call that one first using the xcmd call action on command variable, and then I will type out rdmq generate random number. Okay, in a little bit it's going to be useful having this random number generation in a separate advanced action, but for the moment we'll do that. So once this is run, we now know that the var next random question variable holds the random number that we want to jump to. So I am going to assign to cp command go to slide that variable var next random question. Okay, let's update that and we will test that. So coming here, pressing the go to random question button, you can see it immediately jumps me not to the next slide, but actually to the conclusion. So in theory, that shouldn't happen, right? Because we have slides 2, 3, 4, and this slide it's just jumped me to is slide 5. Well, why did it jump me to the conclusion, which is outside our range? Well, if we go back to this action, you see, there's a peculiarity about CP's command go to slide is that it is 0 based, which is in this command variable's mind, slide 1 is not slide 1, it's slide 0. Slide 2 is not slide 2, it's slide 1. This is because computers generally like to start counting from 0 instead of 1, like humans do. So what we need to get this to work is instead of saying assign, we're going to choose the expression action. We are still going to assign to CP command go to slide. We will choose our var next random question variable, but we are going to instead take away 1 from the number, and that will make this work. Let's test this again. Here we are in the export. I pick go to random question. Okay, that takes me to question 3. I'm going to click submit, which should take me to another random slide. It's taken me to question 2. I'll press it again. It's taken me to question 1. Great, we've visited all of our slides. I'll click it again. It takes me to question 3. I keep on clicking it. It keeps on jumping me between random slides. That's because so far this doesn't know how many slides we want to visit. We've got to indicate when we get to the end of the list of slides we were meant to visit. So let's set up that part of it now. I'm going to go back to my RDMQ next question, advanced action, and I'm now going to make this conditional. I don't want to always run this action. I want to do it under certain circumstances, and the circumstances are going to be if var questions left to visit is greater than or equal to 1. So this will start out at 3. We go visit one slide. We will knock this variable down its value by 1. And then we'll go visit another slide. We'll knock this variable's value down to another 1. And by the time we visit our third slide, this variable will equal 0. And this code here is no longer going to run. Instead, whatever happens in the else statement is going to run. So under these circumstances, we want to jump to the final slide, slide 5, which is our conclusion. Now, the only thing we need to do is make this variable move down by 1. And this can be easily done by selecting the decrement action, and we will choose var questions left to visit by 1. So this will reduce this variable's value by 1. So let's just go back through what we're doing in this action. First of all, we are generating the random number. We are jumping to the random slide. We are reducing this counting variable, which starts at 3 for this 3 slides we're meant to visit, by 1. And then when we run this action again, we're first of all going to check that variable to see whether we've already visited 3 slides. And if we have, we will jump to the end. Let's update this action, and then we will test this again in the output. So if this is working correctly, I should be able to click go to random question. That's the first slide. I'll click this again. That's the second slide. I'll click this again. So although it didn't jump to another slide, it actually, well, did. It randomly picked the second slide again. So we've already gone to 3 random slides. If this is working correctly, if I tap this button, it should take me to the conclusion. There we go. So we've almost got this all working. We just have to find a way to fix the problem of random numbers randomly generating the same number. As we just saw there, we visited the first slide and then we visited the second slide twice. We don't want that to happen. We want to make sure that although we are randomly jumping between questions, that we are still, well, going to visit each slide only once. So this is where it starts to get a little bit tricky, but also a little bit neat. So let's go through how we can fix this problem. The first thing I'm going to do is inside of RDMQ next question is I'm going to reroute this call right here. Instead of calling this generate random number advanced action, I'm going to call this RMDQ generate new random number. So if we set everything up correctly, after calling RDMQ generate new random number, we will be sure that this var next random question has not generated the same number twice for anything on our list. So how are we going to get this set up to work the way we expect it to? Well, first of all, I'm going to remove this decrement expression here. I'm going to move this over into another action in a bit. So let's me just update it. Then I will jump into my generate new random number, and I will open up its advanced action here. So the first thing that we want this action to do is just call the action that will actually generate the random number. So again, I'm going to go to xcmd call action on with literal rdmq generate random number. Okay, and you'll remember this is the one over here where we actually call xcmd random in order to make a new random number. What this action's job is going to be is detecting whether or not the number that was generated was new, was one that we haven't jumped to before. And if it was one that we have jumped before, it's going to call this action again and get it to generate a new random number, and it will keep on doing that until it finally generates a number that we've not visited before. So to get this to work correctly, we are going to need to use a conditional action. So I'm going to open up the conditional tab, and I'm going to check for a situation. If var need new number is equal to true, then we're going to generate a new number. Now at the moment we haven't set up anything with this var need new number variable. There's no way it currently would know whether we need a new number, but we're going to do that in a minute. So if we do need a new number, we're going to generate a new number. If we already have a number that we can work with, well, we are going to instead, we'll do that decrement action, because we know var questions left to visit by 1. We're going to visit a new place, and we're also going to, actually no, we won't do that. We'll do that in a little bit. Okay, so how are we going to detect whether or not we've already visited the random slide that we've generated? Well, this means we're going to have to beef up this action a bit more. So what we need to do is we need to make a record of all the slides we've already been to. And then we can query that record to see whether we've visited a certain slide. Now, the easiest way to do this is just to create a variable, and after we visited slide 1, we put slide 1 into that variable, and we go and visit slide 3, we add the number 3 onto the end of that variable. So when we want to later see whether or not we have already visited slide 3, we just see whether or not that variable contains the number 3. The problem is, let's say that you were testing for slides 1 to 20, and you first of all you go visit slide 1, and then you go visit slide 2, and then you want to check whether you've already visited slide 12. Well, the problem is 1 and 2 right next to each other equal 12 essentially for the check that Captivate's going to do. So we need to find a way to make sure we don't get our numbers running together and causing confusion. And this can easily be done by just, instead of assigning the slide number to this variable, we assign a slide number plus a comma or some other character which denotes the end. So this is where we go and we make an assignment to that var next. Oh wait, no, that's completely the wrong action. Okay, expression. We go var next random question with comma. And this is just going to equal var next random question with a comma on the end of it. Now we will move over to this next block, and we're going to do a check. Now that list that I was just talking about, which records all the slides we've already visited, is going to be our var visited slides var visited slides variable. I'm just going to check to see if that contains what? This var next random question with comma. If it does, well, now we know that this random number that we just generated, well, we've already been to this slide. So we need a new random number. We'll set that equal to true. But if we don't, well, then we have finally landed on a new random number and we don't need to generate any more. So we'll say var need new number equal to false. So to get this whole thing working, we actually need quite a number of moving parts. So we're going to go and make a couple of edits to our advanced actions now. And after we make this edits, we're going to go through the process of what happens when we click these buttons, and then hopefully once we've got all these actions set up, we'll be able to follow the logic. So first of all, we're going to go back to the generate new random number. Now what happens here, we know that if we need a new number equals to true, it's going to generate a new number, and it'll keep on doing that, rotating back and forth until we get a new number. But we need to, if we get to here, we know that we have found a new number, and we are able to do a number of things in here. For example, we now know we are about to visit a slide that we have never visited, so we need to record this visit in our list. So we will go to var visited slides. Visited slides equals var visited slides. So we're assigning it to itself plus that special variable that we've already made, which has a comma on the end of the random number. So each time we get a new slide, it's going to be recorded in that variable. So if we visit slide 3 first, it's going to record 3, comma, and then we visit slide 2, it's going to be 2, comma, and then later we need to check, have we already visited slide 3? We just check to see for 3, comma, if it's inside that variable. If it is, yes, we have already visited that slide. But if we have already visited that slide, then, well, we need to generate a new number. So what we're getting into here is a loop. We keep on looping around until a particular situation is true, which is we've generated a number we've never generated before. This is a while loop, and you may know that Captivate in its last version shipped with the ability to do while loops. Unfortunately, it has a problem. Instead of just executing the same code all in a row until it's satisfied the condition of the while loop, what it does is it runs a loop once, waits a second, runs a loop again, waits another second, runs the loop a third time. Oh, it's okay now, stops running the loop. But in the meantime, any other code that you wanted to happen in like the next blocks is going to run after the first time that while loop looped, and by the second time it's come around and the third time it's come around, that code is already run. In this case, we have all of our following code dependent on us generating multiple random numbers all at once until we get a right one, and then it can continue, which the inbuilt while loop is not going to work for. So instead, we are going to simulate a while loop by getting an action to call one action and then call it again and keep on calling the two actions until they eventually satisfy a particular situation. This won't require us to wait 1 second between calls. It will just keep on doing it in milliseconds until it satisfies the condition. So what we're going to do is we're going to get, first of all, you can see this generate new random number advanced action is triggering this RMDQ generate random number action. But what we're now going to do now as the final action of this generate random number is we're going to call xmd call action on with rdmq generate new random number. Can you see the possibility here for an infinite loop? where we have this action called that action, and then called that action, and then called this action. Yes, that possibility exists inside of here. So you sort of need to make sure that it's set up well, otherwise you're going to end up crashing the browser with infinitely running logic. It's surprisingly easy to flummox a computer. However, in this case, it should be fine. This potentially dangerous behavior is actually simulating a while loop for us, and the while loop's condition is set here. So if I've got this right, there's only one more thing we need to do before we can completely test this new behavior, and that is if we close out of this action, we're going to go to the action that runs when the buttons are clicked. We need to add a new line just above everything else, where we assign var need new number to true. Because if you follow the logic, and we will in a minute, by the time we come and call this action a second time, var need new number will be set to false, which is going to prevent a new random number from being run. So let's update this action, and let's test the movie and see whether this works. So here we are in the output. I'll click play. I'm going to go to a random question. It takes me to question 3, then it takes me to question 2, and it takes me to question 1, and then it takes me to the conclusion. So in that case, it was doing it backwards. Let's refresh the page and see, does it take us on a different path through? It takes me to question 3, takes me to question 2, takes me to question 1. No, that wasn't it, but it could still be random. Question 2 came first, now question 3, now question 1, then all the way to the end. So we have our interaction fully working up here. Just for those who may have had trouble following along with the logic, let's now go back and look at it step by step. We start off here by clicking go to random question. Okay, now we first of all, we checked this variable here, var questions left to visit, which tells us whether or not we've already visited all these question slides. If we haven't, we're going to go through this logic here, which is going to find a new random slide for us to go to. If we have already gone to all the slides, then it's going to take us to this block here, which will jump us to the final conclusion slide. Okay, let's go back over the code for when we need to jump to a new slide. Well, first of all, we set this var need new number to true just to reset these actions. And then we call this RMD generate new random number. We know after we've called this action, we have an absolutely new random number. So we then assign that to cp command go to slide, which jumps us to that random slide. So that's this action. Now we all got to do is understand how we can be sure that we always generate a new random number. So that happens inside of this generate new random number. So let's take this as the first time we go through this action from publishing a new output. So we come in here first, we check this variable var need new number, does it equal true? Yes, we already set it to true with this go to random question button. We're going to jump into this generate random number advanced action set. We immediately make the new random number here, and it's stored into this var next random question, a variable. Then we go and create this var next random question with comma variable, which is just the same, except it's got that number with a comma after it. Then we jump over to the next logic block. We checked this var visited slides variable to see if it contains this next random question with a comma. Now, to begin with, there's nothing in this variable, so there's no new slides. So this is always going to return false, which means we're going to go over here where we set this var need new number with false. This is telling the generate new random number action that we no longer need to generate any new numbers. We already have a new one. We then jump over here to the assign xmd call action on rmdq generate new random number, which is causing our loop. So we loop back over to this parent action here. We check this variable here. Is it equal to true? No, this time it is equal to false. Okay, we reduce the list of slides we need to visit. Then we add the slide we're going to visit to the list of slides we've already visited. and then we jump back over to this button, and this button's action now can go on to its final line here, which jumps us to the new slide. Okay, but now that we're on our new slide, we click the submit button, and this now moves us to another random slide. How does this go now that we already know there's one number we can't visit? So what happens is, first of all, we set var need new number to true, stopping the prevention of the loop. Then we go back down into generate new random number. Okay, we already know we're going to call the generate new random number action, which goes down into here. We generate a new random number. Let's say that var next random question has generated the random number of the slide we've already visited. Let's say that's slide 1. Okay, we put the number 1 with a comma onto this variable here. We then check our var visited slides variable to see whether it's already got 1 comma in it. Yes, it already does. We've already visited slide 1. So instead, it jumps us to this block here, where we say we do need a new number. We set that to true. We go over here. We trigger the parent function again. It comes back over here, and it says, oh, you still need a new number. That's because this variable is not set to false yet. Okay, I'm going to send you back into to generate a random number. Let's say it still generated the same number 1. Okay, it's going to go do that same check. Yep, you still generated the same random number, so you still need to come back and do this again. And this will keep on going around and round forever until eventually we finally go back into it, and it generates a new number, let's say 2. It checks it. Have we already got number 2 in the list? No, we don't. We let the loop know that it's safe to end now, and we will end up jumping to that slide again. So this allows you to visit random slides in your movie while being sure you're not going to visit the same slide twice. It only works if the random slides you want to visit are all in a row. Let's say, for example, you wanted to visit slides 1 to 3, and then 10 to 13, but miss out the slides in the middle. It can't do that in this particular case. So you would have to try to do something else with that, and that would be even more complicated than what we've got here. But it shows us an interesting way of how we can not only just call one advanced action from another, but we can create loops between advanced actions. Using this, you can set up your own while loop. You could probably find a way to make it do a for loop if you were very clever with, things. It allows us to do something you would usually need an array for, or a list, by just using Captivate's initial advanced action features. Just using contains in your conditional tab allows you to simulate something that you would usually use an array for. Hopefully you were able to follow it. Hopefully you were able to learn something. If nothing else, hopefully all the steps are laid out there clearly enough. Thank you very much again to Mr. Chapman for making the request for this particular interaction. I had a lot of fun designing it, and I learned a lot as well myself. Once again, please check out the new CpExtra help. It's going to be progressively updated. Hopefully by the time you get to it, it's looking a little bit better in the front page. Okay, thank you very much. It was great to see you. Catch you next time.